word. My steps in your word, dear Lord. Lead me, guide me every day. Send your anointing, Father, I pray. Order my steps in your word. Please order my steps in your word. Oh, humbly I ask thee, teach me your will. While you are working, help me be still. Order my steps in your word. Please order my steps in your word. Order my steps in your word, dear Lord. Lead me, guide me every day. Send your anointing, Father, I pray. Order my steps in your word. Please order my steps in your word.
Christianity is an African religion. It originated in Africa. People talk about the Middle East, and I get in this debate all the time when I say things like Jesus was African. He was born in Africa, raised in Africa. No, he was a Jew. He was from the Middle East. They try to separate being Jewish from being black as if you can't be both at the same time. There was no such thing as a Middle East, even a term Middle East, until the 1850s. There was a man-made canal, man-made waterway called the Suez Canal that was built that separated what we now call the Middle East from Northeast Africa. All of that land mass was all considered Northeast Africa. They've tried to get slick with their geographical designations by trying to make you think Egypt is not in Africa. They want you to think of Africa as everything below the Sahara Desert. So that's why you consistently hear the term sub-Saharan Africa. Well, they weren't sub-Saharan. Egyptians weren't sub-Saharan. So that's their code word for they weren't black. So all of the accomplishments of building pyramids and the things that they did in Egypt, they want to erase that from black culture, from the black diaspora. That's simply not factual. So Jesus being born in Africa
was not originally called Africa. We had a completely different name. Wow. I'm going to tell you what Africa was called, why the name changed, and who changed it. Pay attention. The landmass we now know as Africa was home to many peoples over the centuries. Moors, Numidians, Nubians, Carthaginians, and Ethiopians. The name Africa was created by Europeans, and the Romans popularized it in the West as part of their conquest of the region, specifically the northern parts of the continent. The word Africa was Greek and Latin origin. Africa in Latin means sunny, and Phrike in Greek means the spirit of horror. The land was known by many names such as Ortygia, Kofi, Libya, and Ethiopia. But what was the original name of Africa? The indigenous name. It was Alkebulan, which translates to the Garden of Eden and Mother of Mankind. Now, some would like to argue that Alkebulan is an Arabic name, but the truth is it just sounds Arabic because of the al and is not Arabic in origin. As we build a better awareness of our identity, now you know what the continent was originally called.
Important Roman, I would argue, who actually ever came to Britain was the African emperor, Septimius Severus. He was one of the greatest Roman emperors. So he was born in North Africa in AD 145. He was a warrior. He came here to Britain in AD 208. He got a message from the governor, and the governor said that we here in Britain are being attacked from the north and we're in danger of being overrun. The first thing he does is have them build the walls of Roman London. Wow. So the city of London, to this day, the square mile is defined by the African emperor Septimius Severus. If you walk into the reception area of the British Museum, the first bust you see is a bust of Septimius Severus, alabaster white, but actually when he was in real life in the Roman world, it would have been painted as he was, a man from North Africa. This is a man who's there all the time. He's right in front of us all the time in the British Museum, but nobody knows unless you dig into the story that he was a warrior emperor from North Africa who stayed true to his own heritage.
18th and 19th century, it was decided that it was just not appropriate for all this knowledge to come from an African country. If you read what the Greeks said they got everything from Egypt. They got all their knowledge from Egypt. Pythagoras spent 15 years in Egypt, and what did he have to do? He probably had to spend 5 years convincing them that he was worthy to get the knowledge that they had. Now, when did we come up with the idea that the Greeks created everything from scratch?
They were seized by force. That is the truth. That is why they are in the British Museum. The British Museum is the largest depository of stolen goods in the world.
Paul Boateng is a member of the House of Lords, and he was at the ceremony on Thursday. The private ceremony was held just a short space away from Buckingham Palace. It included objects that were taken following the 1868 siege by British troops. There was a cup and a shield and a tableau that can't be on display as it's a religious artifact. These were all stolen objects, but there was also a lock of hair that belonged to the Crown Prince Alamayu. He was 7 years old when he was brought back to England along with thousands of stolen treasures. Decades after the prince died of pneumonia as a teenager, Ethiopia did ask for Alamayu's remains to be repatriated. He'd been buried at St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. That request was made in 2007 to Buckingham Palace, but the palace refused, saying to move him would disturb other remains. We did speak to the Ethiopian ambassador to the UK at the event. He says they are in talks with the British government because repatriating the prince's remains is important to Ethiopians, and they hope that their prince, Alamayu, can one day come home again.
So this is a timeline that my colleague Paul Abina in London, England, and I developed. He was a high school history teacher, right? And so because folk don't really understand and appreciate history because it's not taught right. So what he did was to lay out 8,000 years of history, beginning 5,200 years in the past, going into the present moment, and then 3,000 years into the future, because the whole purpose of the present moment is to connect with the past so that you can create the future. And so we have here a layout of the accomplishments, scientific accomplishments made by African people. So we don't have to make anything up. All we need to do is to do the research. So here we have Nabta Playa, the first astroarchaeological calendar that was developed in Africa, 7,200 BC. 3,500 years older than Stonehenge. Africans studying the stars, knew that the earth was round, knew the earth revolved in this orbit around the sun. We have here Africans building great temples and pyramids. Imhotep built the Step Pyramid, the first building in the world, the Great Pyramids at Giza. We have images. All right, go from mic to mic. And worry about the headset. Let me take the headset off if you don't mind. So here we have images, actual images of all the African rulers, kings and rulers, images that were carved during their lifetime, man. So we can see that they're African, even though the noses might be missing or the lips might be missing. We can see that these are African people, and these are the things that they created: writing, agriculture, astronomy, physics, you name it, medicine. Imhotep, the first physician in recorded history. So this is all what we did when we were in control of our destiny, brother, right? And then to give you context, right here, 832 BC is when Homer wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey. The first European book was written thousands of years after Africans had written books and kept them in their libraries and their temples. And then right here we get to 753 BC when Romulus and Remus founded the city of Rome. So right here, this little bitty space right here is the beginning of Greco-Roman history and culture. This is the beginning of white folk culture thousands of years after African culture. So to get to your question and to illustrate it, right here in blue, this little period in blue here, this little small period in blue here, from 1444 to 1888 is the European enslavement of African people. So anytime we begin our history in slavery, we are missing out on all of this documented history, documented success. So that's why I write, man. That's why I teach. That's why I'm excavating, so that we can document this information and put it in print form, come here and talk about it so we can know the truth and then act on this truth. All right? So that's it. That's it. That's a brief lesson.
Where can we get this?
You get it from me. Go to my website, ikg-info.com.
How do I say this? The entire Bible is about black people. Not only was Jesus black, but every character in the Bible seems to be black too. Yeah, Zephaniah and Jeremiah and Jebediah, those all aren't white people names, okay? And Jesus wasn't some tan, partially melanated Middle Eastern person either. I'm talking straight up black dude, okay? Even in the book of Revelation, when you get the vision of Daniel, he's describing someone with feet like burnt brass and white woolly hair, and we've got the deep running water voice with the red eyes, and you guys, he's black. The Jewish people are black people, like Kanye was right. And those people yelling at the park dressed in purple about black people being the real Hebrew Israelites, they're right, okay? Like, anytime you see the word Hebrew or Israelite or Jew in the Bible, in your mind you got to replace that with black person. So the whole Bible is going to make a lot more sense to you once you start reading it like that. But you need to let this get settled in your heart now before you get up there. So, I mean, they were literally whipping him on his way to get crucified, you guys. Crucifixion was a punishment, like, for slaves back then. And gladiators. And all the gladiators were black too. Did you know that? Like, you guys, he was sold for 30 pieces of silver. That was the maximum amount of money that a slave could be sold for. Oh, just coincidence? Above his cross, it says INRI. They were like mocking him. They were saying it says this is the king of the Jews. They're saying, like, here's the king of the black people. Look what we did to him. Why does the KKK burn crosses, you guys? The racist KKK. It's just the black.
For you to say the first Chinese may have been black, you just erased your own people and history and gave the Wabos the history. You have no honor. So first of all, I just had to Google Wabo, and it means wannabe aboriginals. Make of that what you will. So this guy's upset because I talked about the research findings of Professor Jin Li of Shanghai's Fudan University, indicating that there is ancient black ancestry among the Chinese people. This professor talks about ancient migration patterns between Africa and Asia dating back some 60,000 years. And you can even see the likeness today when you compare the features of Chinese people and the Khoisan people of South Africa. I think it's sad that you feel I have no honor and that I've erased the history of my people in talking about this. The way I see it, we're mostly all taught one version of history, but that learning should never stop and we should always be open to new information. And when we explore new information, I don't think it erases anything, it just adds to the richness of our history. And surely, if we learn that we might be more closely connected than we realized, that must be a good thing, not a bad thing, right?
Chinese geneticists have already admitted the original ancestor of China was an African. Chinese geneticists just admitted last year the original ancestor of China was African. The East Indian geneticists have already admitted the original ancestor of East India was an African. Our brothers and sisters in the South Pacific have already admitted the original ancestor of the islands of the South Pacific was an African. Our Australian ancestors have already admitted the original inhabitant of Australia was an African. This has been proven scientifically. This has been proven genetically. This has been proven anthropologically. In Mexico, the original ancestor of Mexico was an African from the continent. So can somebody help me understand? Can somebody help me understand? How is it everybody on earth of color, every people of color on the planet of earth, brown people, say their first ancestor was an African red people. Their first ancestor was an African yellow people. Their first ancestor was an African. But you mean to tell me the ones who look the most like the African, which is the American African, you look just like my Nigerian brothers and sisters. You look just like my Ghanaian brothers and sisters. You look just like my Congolese brothers and sisters, but yet you not from Africa. Lord have mercy.
They're not comfortable for white people. They're not comfortable for them to talk about the possibility that Africans were here before the Europeans. So what do you do with the heads in Mexico that you find at San Lorenzo, at Tres Zapotes? What do you do with those? All right? You ignore them. What do you do with Columbus's diary that says the Africans know a way to the west, but it goes around the doldrums, we would never survive? What do you do with that? You ignore it. What do you do with Balboa's diary that says we came upon this African village in the Isthmus? How did these Africans get here? What do you do with that? You ignore it. Why? To preserve the myth that the Europeans were here first. What do you do with all of this written literature and history that says that Abubakar II of Mali sent 200 ships to the west? One came back and said they were afraid that the others disappeared. And then to have Balboa find this village that looks just like Mali, where he was, what do you do with this information? You ignore it. You ignore it. Why? To preserve the myth of white superiority. That's what our whole educational process is devoted to. What do you do with this whole history? This is a written history, my dear. Written. I'm not talking about hearsay. I'm not talking about a griot said this. I'm not talking about something handed down from one generation to the other through voice. I'm talking about written history of the Egyptians. What do you do with this? You ignore it.
I'm gonna be straight up. I'm officially ashamed to even be considered a white American. And it doesn't help that I'm fluorescent as fuck, as if Dracula had a love child with Casper the Ghost. You know, it's 2023, so if we can no longer identify with our biological gender, then I'm officially no longer identifying with my biological ethnicity. Because I just found out the most messed up thing. And I strongly encourage you to do your own research into this and find out your own information. That way, like, you find it out for yourself. But this is what I just learned. George Washington, right? Did you know that there were indigenous black people in the Americas, and they were Moorish black people, and that the chopping of the cherry tree of George Washington was him officially cutting off their inheritance and their history from ever being remembered, and that he had written and said that in 200 years, if we remove the turbans from their heads, the sandals from their feet, and we make them think that they are just like any other black people, that they will forget their entire history and their inheritance and the fact that they are indigenous to the Americas. And did you know that our first peace treaty ever signed was with Morocco? And that if they had wanted their freedom, they could have had it, but they were never told about it, and so they were enslaved instead. Why can't we ever, why can't, we're the worst. Like, we're the worst. Our history is a total lie of everything.
Slavery was really like from slaves.
I worked hard. I'd get up at 4 o'clock and get my breakfast done. Just at dawn of day, I go to the field and we pick cotton.
Mr. and Mrs. Haywood Younginz of Sharkey County, Mississippi have, between them, picked cotton for over a century.
My boss man came along. He says, Mary Jane? I said, sir. Says, I say, when you wash? I said, I washed last night. He said, I don't want you to do that no more. That's my agent, you know. He says, every Friday morning or Friday evening, you wash. And let all the children stay there with you until you get through. When you get through, then y'all can go back to the field and wait. Now, the agents was mean, some of them. Some of them was mean. They want to whoop the colored people. And that time the white man come along. He says, hey, but you ain't in the field yet? He just had started plowing. He said,
our people, hair has played an important role in survival. Our ancestors would place rice, seeds, and sometimes gold on the scalp between two sections of hair. They did this so that if they were captured and forced to voyage across the Atlantic, they'd at least have a small amount of food for sustenance. The technique was also used if they were planning a brave escape. Seeds and gold could help them build their new life.
You stretch your straw with that. Then you turn around and you get your straw as thick as you want it. You break up your film and you lay them on top of your straw like that. Then when you get that like you want it, then you cover it up with cornstalk. See what I mean? Then when you get enough starch out and then you take that same day, cover this tail up. And you leave it alone then, till you get ready to go in the bank. If it's a week, 2 months, 3 months, the tail will be good.
That's why you call it a bank, because you store stuff?
That's why I call it a bank. Call them tailor banks.
When,
see how many I got there?
Where you learn how to do this at? Who taught you?
I'm like that.
Your daddy taught you how to do that?
Yeah.
And now you teaching me how to do it?
Yeah. This is the best way out. Tell you why I say that.
Why is it the best way?
Cold won't hurt him as bad.
There ain't no new kind of modern way. Nobody told you about a new modern way.
They put them in the kiln, the modern way. They have a tater house. You carry them there and you keep the heat on them 60 or 70 days. Try to cure the tater. And sometimes all that makes a mistake. Do what?
But you like this way better.
Yeah, that's the way I'm going.
Okay.
You ain't able to go down another way. I'm going the pro way.
Learned about the history of education. I started questioning what I was doing as a teacher by reading the book Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto. I love that book so much that I decided to read other books by him, and one of the books that he wrote is An Underground History of American Education. I read through that whole book and became absolutely convinced that if people knew the history of American education, we would not be doing what we're doing. Here are some quotes from people who helped to set up our American education system. What is the purpose of industrial education? To fill the young of the species with knowledge and awaken their intelligence? Nothing could be further from the truth. The aim is simply to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same safe level, to breed and train a standardized citizenry, to put down dissent and originality. That is its aim in the United States, and that is its aim everywhere else. H.L. Mencken. If the public schools can keep the children occupied throughout the day with sports after school and homework in the evening, the parents will have less than an hour a day with their children, and the families and Christian churches' influence over them could be broken in about a generation. John Dewey. We who are engaged in the sacred cause of education are entitled to look upon all parents as having given hostages to our cause. Horace Mann. Education should aim at destroying free will so that after pupils are thus schooled, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished. Johann.
There's a German kid right now, as you and I speaking, subject mining. But when you look at his continent, wherever he comes from, there's no minerals underground. But the boys and girls are being taught about mining and minerals. Me and you, there was no subject called mining in high school. What mining were you taught in high school? What's the process to start a mine? Just tell me basics of mining. But mining is a strong pillar, probably amongst the strongest pillars of our economy. So that means that there's a child in Germany somewhere that's being prepared, in Asia somewhere, that's being prepared to come and run this economy, while your kids are being prepared to come and work for those German kids that are going to come here in future. Because your kids are being taught how to do nonsense, how to label an insect. Listen, our economy in this country, it's agriculture. Our economy in this country, I can even break down what agriculture is. Mining. manufacturing. Why aren't those things primary subjects in primary school, in high school, so that you've got a basic understanding of your own economy? That means some people must come from somewhere to run this economy, because your kids were never taught anything about this economy. So designed to continue systematic slavery and suppress the people of the day and make sure that the future belongs to those who are prepared for it.
I teach 7th grade, they are still performing on the 4th grade level.
And that's the kids that are doing well. Because I also teach 7th grade, and we have kids that have math grade level equivalents of 1st and 2nd grade, 3rd grade, many at 4th grade, very few at grade level, if any, in some classes. These kids can't read. They can't decode. They have no vocabulary, no background knowledge. I've never seen anything like it. For context, for 8 years, I taught a self-contained program for significant language-based learning disabilities. Like, it was the most restrictive environment. It was the step before being sent to a specialized school. And my 5th graders with significant language-based learning disabilities could write better than non-disabled 7th graders can now. They can't write a sentence. They don't know what state they live in. They don't know what region of the country they're in. They have no background knowledge. Most of them don't know who the president is.
7th grade English teacher here. I teach in northern Houston, and I teach at one of the more affluent schools. When I tell you that these babies cannot read, they cannot write, and they cannot comprehend, I'm not being funny. I'm being dead serious.
So many of America's children can't read or write. And instead of focusing on math and teaching kids how to read and teaching kids how to write, what are schools focused on? Putting boys in girls' bathrooms. Making sure your child doesn't offend someone by knowing the correct pronoun. Teaching our children that because of the color they were born, they can't make it in America. Or if they're white, they're the reason those other kids can't make it in America. And the teachers' unions and Biden's Secretary of Education, many teachers and school boards are fully behind this. When the Secretary of Education refuses to define what a woman is, how are we supposed to believe that this is someone who's going to take properly educating children seriously? We have thousands of students in Pennsylvania protesting their school boards because they won't keep boys out of girls' restrooms. Even in Canada, you have thousands and thousands of parents protesting during the 1 million March for Children to keep these ideologies out of schools. Why can't we focus on creating a better learning environment for children, making sure they're getting the proper education, instead of focusing so much on identities and skin color? Just a thought.
The Harlem Hellfighters was a regiment of New York National Guardsmen in the First World War. They were set up to fail by their own government. They were humiliated, degraded, eventually given to the French army as a throwaway, and they ended up coming home as one of the most decorated units in the entire U.S. Army.
The Harlem Hellfighters are one of the most important regiments in American history. In World War I, they helped to establish to the entire world the power of black soldiers in the military.
It was very difficult at that time for African Americans to get into the United States military because there was this perception that African Americans would not do well in battle. They had to overcome the prejudice of their own countrymen and yet also perform ably on the battlefield.
Like so many units of African American descent, when they go overseas, they're not sure what they're going to do. Are they going to fight as infantry? Or are they going to be stevedores and load ships? Or are they going to be labor units and cut wood?
And so they're committed to labor duty, they're unloading ships, building latrines, those type of support services. And as you can imagine, these men have been trained and they're willing to fight, they're ready to fight, and this is stressful for them.
They were finally given to the French army, which in a way was an even greater insult because in the First World War, when the United States entered, General Pershing, the commanding officer, was very clear that American forces would not be fed piecemeal into the French and British army because the French and British wanted reinforcements, and Pershing said absolutely not. When Americans join this war, they will fight as an American force under an American flag led by an American general. ... except for the black guys. You can have them.
Henry Johnson is perhaps one of the most remarkable black military heroes in U.S. history.
And he found himself in no man's land with Private Needham Roberts manning a listening post.
And Needham Roberts hears click, click, click. He realizes somebody's cutting the wire. It's potentially a German raid.
And so Roberts is passing him grenades, and they line up these grenades, and the Germans actually do come across the lines. Roberts is hurt, and now Henry Johnson is left to defend their position and to stave off this attack. And then he makes the mistake of jamming a French cartridge into his American gun, and it no longer will work. And the Germans are on top of it.
He then used his rifle like a club, and then he ended up fighting with a knife against the Kaiser's best and turned them.
He's wounded in the fray. He's struck, for example, in the foot, and has a debilitating injury as a result. And he fights them off, he says, for what seemed like an hour.
The Germans ran shrieking into the night, all because of one man.
It's not until the next morning that people realize what a tremendous act this was. They discover 4 bodies of dead German soldiers. And they also realize from the equipment and other things that are left behind that as many as 30 may have been involved in this altercation.
As soon as he drove off those Germans, the French awarded him with the Croix de Guerre, a great honor. Unfortunately, it took about 75 years for the US government to give him the Legion of Merit. Had he been white, he would have walked out of that war with the Medal of Honor. What was so shocking to me when I began to research the story of the Hellfighters was that after they had performed so magnificently in combat, the United States government actually sent a memorandum to the French government, essentially implementing Jim Crow, essentially saying, don't give them some notion that they are equals, because we don't want them taking that notion back to the United States and demanding equality.
When they come back to the United States, he's not awarded the Purple Heart. There's no notation in his military record of his injury. And so he winds up not being able to work because of this injury. He doesn't get any kind of assistance from the army or from the government as a result. And he ends up dying in 1929 penniless. So it again shows the paradox. Here's this great story of valor and of courage on the part of this soldier. And ultimately, he comes back to a nation that doesn't honor that sacrifice.
We tend to think we all know American history so well, but the story of the Harlem Hellfighters should be one of the first stories told. It wasn't about killing other people, it was about being Americans and serving their country well. That was the inclination of the Harlem Hellfighters.
When you are African American in 1917, democracy is armor. Democracy is a weapon. And to fight for a war to make the world safe for democracy was something more than just some ethereal crusade for the Hellfighters. It had concrete results. They were fighting for the rights to be a citizen of the country that they were born in.
Jones was a former African-American slave who went into Arkansas. He stacked his money up and he became a railroad owner. He owned a railroad system, and the city of Pine Bluff, Arkansas ended up buying his railroad system, and that system is still owned by Pine Bluff right now. The Patterson Car Company was a car company founded by former slaves, African-American men, and the Patterson Car Company was the first African-American car manufacturer in the country, I think the only manufacturer in the country. And what's interesting about the Patterson Car Company, it was in Ohio. Their cars were considered higher quality than the Model T cars that Henry Ford had.
The DeRay brothers, Ford and them stole it. That's why all over the world, Ford never gets credit for inventing a car. He gets credit for mass production.
The cars began coming off the assembly line at the rate of 1 every 40 seconds.
Until that, they take one car and put it together. One car and put it together. But where did he get that from? George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver was never around black folks till he went to Tuskegee. His mother and father died or was killed. And a white family adopted him from Iowa. You know, black folks in Iowa, except football players. So he went to grade school, high school, and they didn't have no segregation school. They didn't have enough people. And so now George Washington Carver leaves after he gets All this education came out there. He goes to Tuskegee. Henry Ford came down to visit, like he always see his friend. And he said, Mr. Ford, I got something here. Study plants. And see, if you take this back and give it to your engineers, they can build more than one car at a time. He took it back. Mass production all over the world is called the plant, right?
Everybody made joke of him because they said, well, you know, what, the plants are talking to him? You know, is this how he's getting these properties of these plants? And George Washington Carver, in his quiet, dignified way, said, well, who taught me? I'm not saying that they talk to me like they got a tongue, but I can look at a plant and see what it can do for the human family.
The military came to George Washington Carver, and they said, we need you to do something for us. Can you invent something that out of it we can get paint, glue, ink, and plastic? Yeah, I can handle that. They tell me how smart black folks are. I can handle that. So he came back, called sardine. Now you want to hear something funny? The #1 cancer group in America is vegetarians. Because you wasn't supposed to eat soy. When he got to Tuskegee, they thought he was gay. No association with women, high-pitched voice, they thought he was gay.
The finest use we've been able to make of peanuts is in the treatment of the after effects of infantile paralysis.
And he'd rather for you to believe he was gay than tell you that them white folks that adopted him castrated him so he couldn't have sex with their daughter. Like, who wanted them, huh?
Did you know Dr. George Washington Carver made alcohol, vinegar, rubber, shoe blackening, and syrup from sweet potatoes, and dye, stains, cheese, Worcestershire sauce, margarine, paints, facial cream, and a preparation used in the fight against infantile paralysis from peanuts. In all, he made 118 different items from sweet potatoes and found more than 300 uses for the peanut. By the time the United Peanut Association of America held its annual convention in Montgomery, Alabama in 1919, peanuts were second only to cotton as a cash crop. Although it comprised an $80 million industry, most of the peanut farmers didn't know that Carver had brought them prosperity. To them, he was just an eccentric old colored man who had dabbled with plants. Nonetheless, one of the group insisted that they should learn as much as they could about their product. They invited Carver to attend their meeting to discuss his experiments. However, when he arrived at the hotel, the bellman wouldn't let him in because he was black. But Carver was accustomed to such indignities. He had come to the South to help a struggling country confront its agricultural problems. He promised himself he would bring credit to his race regardless of the sacrifices and personal humiliation. This is
Tuskegee, him and Henry Ford was ace buddies. So he told Henry Ford one day, see, they was making one car at a time. Wasn't no mass production.
Okay.
So he told Henry Ford, he said, if you take this package I'm giving you, this is my study on plants. And if you have your engineers study this package here, you'll be able to make more than one car at a time. You'll have an assembly line. Now, you think it's an accident that all over the world, the mass production is called the plant?
Wow.
The plant all over the world, care where you are, it's called the plant. That's that black man, George Washington Carver.
Benjamin Banneker was an African-American almanac author, surveyor, naturalist, and farmer. He is known for being part of the group led by Major Andrew Ellicott that surveyed the original borders of the District of Columbia, the federal capital district of the United States. Banneker's knowledge of astronomy helped him author a commercially successful series of almanacs. Thomas L. Jennings was an African-American tradesman and abolitionist in New York City, New York. He operated and owned a tailoring business. In 1821, he was one of the first African-Americans to be granted a patent for his method of dry cleaning. With the proceeds of his invention, he bought his wife and children's freedom, then continued his civil rights work. Sarah Boone was an African-American inventor who on April 26, 1892, obtained United States patent rights for her improvements to the ironing board. Boone's ironing board was designed to improve the quality of ironing sleeves and the bodies of women's garments. Otis Frank Boykin was an African-American inventor and engineer. He holds the patents for 28 electronic devices. One of his early inventions was an improved wire resistor, which had reduced inductance and reactance due to the physical arrangement of the wire. Other notable inventions include a variable resistor used in guided missiles. His most famous invention was likely a control unit for the artificial cardiac pacemaker. The device essentially uses electrical impulses to maintain a regular heartbeat. Jan Ertz Manselinger was an African-American inventor whose lasting machine brought significant change to the manufacturing of shoes. Manselinger obtained a patent for his invention of an automatic shoe laster in 1883. A skilled hand laster could produce 50 pairs in a 10-hour day. Manselinger's machine could produce between 150 and 700 pairs of shoes a day, cutting shoe prices across the nation in half. Alexander Miles was an African-American inventor, best known for being awarded patents for automatically opening and closing elevator doors. He was awarded the patent in October 11, 1887. Percy LaVon Julian was an African-American research chemist and a pioneer in chemical synthesis of medicinal drugs from plants. His work laid the foundation for the steroid drugs industry production of cortisone and other cortisoid steroids and birth control pills. Julian received more than 130 chemical patents.
People always say that black people haven't invented anything. Is that true? Here are a few black inventors and their inventions. Let's start with Garrett Augustus Morgan, born on March 14, 1877 in Kentucky, USA. He was known as the inventor of the gas mask in 1912, and 2 years later received a gold medal for his invention, which helped save many lives. He was also the inventor of the red light, an invention to which he eventually sold the rights to General Electric for $40,000. Then we have Alexander Miles, born on May 18th in the state of Ohio. He was known for having played a major role in improving elevators with his automated system. Previously, elevators had to be closed manually by the person entering or leaving, which was very dangerous. It was when Miles rode an elevator that he realized how dangerous it was and decided to do something about it. To this end, he spent years creating a system capable of closing the doors when the elevator was in motion, then opening them when it was stationary. His invention was a great success, helping to make him rich before his death in 1918. Next, we have Lewis Howard Latimer, who played a major role in improving the electric light bulb invented by Thomas Edison. The bulbs were not at all durable, as they were made from bamboo or paper filaments and lasted barely a few days. It was Lewis who changed all that by inventing a filament made of carbon, which was far more resistant than the previous ones. After that, bulbs could last for weeks and months. Lewis Latimer was an outstanding engineer who worked with inventors.
George Carruthers built an ultraviolet camera used in space. From blood tests to eye surgery tools, cell phone towers to refrigerated trucks, amazing African-American minds made science inventions we use today. But they did not get the credit they deserved. By sharing the
5 lesser-known black inventors and their contributions. Lewis Howard Latimer, 1848-1928. Latimer was an inventor and draftsman who played a crucial role in the development of the telephone and the light bulb. He improved the design of the carbon filament used in incandescent light bulbs, making them more efficient and longer lasting. Granville T. Woods, 1856-1910. Woods was an inventor and electrical engineer known as the Black Edison. He held more than 60 patents for various inventions, including improvements to railway systems, the development of the multiplex telegraph, a precursor to the telephone, and advancements in electric power distribution. Sarah E. Good, 1855-1905. Good was the first African-American woman to receive a patent. She invented a foldable cabinet bed, a space-saving piece of furniture that could be transformed from a desk into a bed, making it ideal for small apartments. Frederick McKinley Jones, 1893-1961. Jones was an inventor and entrepreneur known for his pioneering work in refrigeration. He developed the first successful portable air cooling unit for trucks, which revolutionized the transportation of perishable goods. Marie Van Britten Brown, 1922-1999. Brown was an inventor who, along with her husband, created the first home security system with a closed-circuit television. Their invention laid the groundwork for modern home security systems, with features like remote monitoring and the ability to communicate with visitors at the door. These inventors made significant contributions to various fields, often with lasting impacts on technology and society, despite not receiving the same level of recognition as some of their contemporaries.
In 1922, the Mississippi State Senate voted to send all the state's black residents to Africa. The Senate voted 25-9 to ask the federal government to trade some of the World War I debts owed by European countries for a piece of colonial Africa. Any part would do, where the government would then ship Mississippi's black residents, creating a final home for the American Negro. What opposition there was to the proposal in the all-white Mississippi legislature came not from people who believed in racial equality, but from plantation owners who feared losing their cheap, brutalized labor force. Also, the proposal had a few black supporters, black separatists who preferred a move to Africa over the violence and abuse that African Americans faced in Jim Crow, Mississippi. Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 21 was written by Senator Tory George McCallum. He argued that the Negro question would finally be resolved either voluntarily or by force. Mississippi's black residents, who in the 1920 census made up 52% of the state's population. Among those interested in colonization was Abraham Lincoln, who was drawn repeatedly to the idea. In 1862, Congress passed a bill allocating $600,000 for the colonization of formerly enslaved people living in the District of Columbia. Lincoln sent a young free black man named John Willis Menard to British Honduras to scout it as a potential location. Lincoln struck a deal to set up a colony in the Carriqui province of what is now Panama, but strenuous objections from Central American countries led him to scuttle the plan. He eventually signed off on a disastrous experiment that sent 453 free Virginia blacks to the Haitian island of Elivake. High rates of disease and a mutiny led to its collapse and 350 survivors sailing back to Virginia. Less than a year later, even though the resolution passed the Mississippi State Senate, it did not pass House of Representatives, voting the resolution down 40-32. Most of the chamber's debate over the bill has been lost to history.
Here we have a picture of the Ku Klux Klan marching in 1924. But I want you to tell me what state you think this was in. I'll give you 3 seconds to go comment. 3, 2, 1. This marching of the Ku Klux Klan was in Maine. Yes, that Maine. As northeast as you can go, Maine. Maine truly flies under the radar. It's a state that many people don't think about. A lot of people don't know that Maine has a wildly racist history. Now, people in Maine don't really think about race or the history of race. And is just as white now as it was in 1820, even surviving the Great Migration of African Americans north. Maine was one of the states that saw one of the biggest influxes of the Ku Klux Klan during the 1920s. There's even a reported Klan rally in Portland, Maine in 1926 that hosted 30,000 Klan members. The 20th century, Maine unions refused to let African Americans work there. For a long time, the University of Maine refused to let Native American and African American students stay in dormitories on campus. Maine has a wild history with the Native Americans. There's the Wabanaki genocide. English militia forced the Native American to take them back to his village, where they then massacred everyone there. Even in the 20th century, members of the Wabanaki were not Maine citizens until the 20s, not allowed to vote in federal elections until 1957, and couldn't vote in state elections until 1967. And a lot of the people responsible for the rampant racism in Maine in the 1900s are grandparents to people who are alive in 2023.
In 1915, the U.S. invaded Haiti. Immediately, they seized all the gold from Haitian banks and transferred them to the National City Bank in New York. The U.S. also put all Haitian banks under control of American banks. The United States took control of Haiti and wrote them a new constitution, one written to benefit them. The new constitution allowed Americans to purchase Haitian lands easily. Haitians, known for not giving up without a fight, gathered in their masses and decided to fight against this new constitution. The most famous leader in this rebellion was Charlemagne Perrault. The U.S. Marines hunted down Perrault, executed him, and tied his body to a door and paraded it through the streets of Haiti. They even took photos of the hero's dead body and scattered thousands from a plane throughout the nation. The U.S. military took control and ruled Haiti as a colony for 20 years. This colonial rule led to neo-colonialism, which led to puppet dictators like Papa Doc.
King got shot.
And I sat in front of a television set, and I wondered what it meant to me that he's dead, and that he died, and his last act was trying to get a 15-cent wage increase for garbage men, and that he was hauled to his grave by 2 mules on a rickety cart, and that on his tombstone was written, free at last, thank God Almighty, free at last. And in his last speech on television, as I watched the news reports come over, it showed his last words the night before, and he said that he'd been to the mountain and that he'd seen the promised land. And he said, I don't know if I'm going to get there with you, but it doesn't matter about me, because I know we're going to get there. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And he was shot dead the next day. And I thought, somehow this has got to matter somewhere. And if we don't, all as citizens, do something that is a person-to-person contribution, I don't think that we're really going to have any place to come home to if we do get a job. I felt that it was, there was just nothing that I could do in terms of what I know and what I see and what I feel. I couldn't think of any other alternative rather than to make my time, my energies, and my money fully available to do what I can as an individual to rectify the situation we're in.
In 1960, which would be almost 100 years after the end of slavery, 22% of black kids grew up in homes with only one parent.
Just 22%?
Yes.
4 out of 5 were in homes with both parents?
Yes. 30 years later, after the liberal welfare state, that number had more than tripled. And so I said, well, let us compare, if we can speculate on how much that 22% was due to the legacy of slavery. But we know that that tripling was not due to the legacy of slavery. It was due to the legacy of a whole different set of policies.
Into Pruitt I go, the welfare department came to our home. They talked with my mother about moving into the housing project, but the stipulation was that my father could not be with us. They would put us into the housing project only if he left the state. My mother and father discussed it, and they decided that it was best for the 12 children for the father to leave the home. And that's how we got into the projects.
The welfare department had a rule that no able-bodied man could be in the house if a woman received aid for dependent children. If a man lost his job, if he's looking for work, he still had to leave the home. And there was even a night staff of men who worked for the welfare department whose job was to go to the homes of the welfare recipients, and they searched to find if there was a man in the home. Sometimes men came back at night to be with their families. Some were found in the closet hiding.
I remember vividly my mother telling us, if white people come to the house and ask you guys questions, tell them that your father is not here. Tell them that your father has never been here and you have not seen your father. I trusted her. I knew that there was a reason that we had to do this charade, and I participated in the charade. I sat there and looked those people in the eye and told them with pure earnestness that no, I have not seen my father, and no, my daddy does not live here. And but I knew that I was lying, and that made me wonder, who are these people?
Children to feed.
10.
10 children.
Yes.
Are there times when you don't have enough food at the house to go around?
Yes, lots of times.
There are times
Just have to make out what I have, give each one of them a little what I have.
What did you have for dinner today?
I didn't have any dinner.
You're going to have a baby before long.
Yes.
Mrs. Anders, what does your husband do for a living?
He gets a job in Hayfield.
In Hayfield?
Yes.
How much does he make when he's working?
From $3 to $4 a day.
$3 to $4 a day?
Yes.
And he hasn't worked now in 3 or 4 weeks?
Yes.
Do you get food stamps?
No, because I'm not able to get them.
Why not?
I ain't got them this month. They cost $70 and I don't have it.
Have you asked for any help from anyone in raising the money to buy those stamps?
No, there ain't no need.
Why?
They ain't gonna give it to you.
Have you been down to the welfare department and talked to them, or has your husband?
No, so the last time I went to the welfare, the lady told me, said that if you have a living husband, that they couldn't give you no help.
Even if he's not working?
Yeah.
Were left to fend for themselves. Jerome, how old are you?
9.
9. Do you go to school?
Yes.
Where do you go to school, Jerome?
At the Okeechobee Elementary School.
I see. What is your sister's name?
Lois.
That's Lois. And what are your other sisters' names?
Jacqueline. And Beulah.
Catherine and Beulah. What happened to your foot, Jerome?
Dig a nail in out there by the wash house.
So you drove a nail in out by the wash house. What did your mother do for that?
With some alcohol on it.
Where do you sleep, Jerome?
In his bed.
You have this big bed?
Yes.
What happened? How did you get that hole in that bed there, Jerome?
The rats.
The what?
Rats.
Now, Jerome, you are taking care of Kathy, of Beulah, and Lois.
Yes.
Now, are you going to give them lunch today?
Yes.
What are you going to feed them?
I don't know.
Do you have any food here to give them?
Yes.
Let's see. What time does your mother come home?
I don't know.
The following day, Eileen King, the mother of Jerome, Kathy, Lois, and Beulah, again was picking beans. Eileen King, I saw your children yesterday at the Okeechobee camp. Why didn't you put them in the nursery?
Don't make enough to pay for it.
How much does it cost to put them in?
85 cents.
85 cents.
That's right.
Eileen, what time did you come out the field this morning?
6 o'clock.
What time would you get home?
About 3:30, 4 o'clock.
6 this morning to 4 o'clock this afternoon.
That's right.
How much did you earn?
$1.
$1?
That's right. $1.
Is that because the beans were of poor quality? That's right. Has this happened before? That's right. How much will your food cost you today? About $2. Aileen, how old are you? 29. How many children do you have? 13. How old were you when you first started working in the fields? 8. You've been working 21 years in the field? That's right. Aileen, do you ever think you...
Blacks were obsessed with white fever. They wanted acceptance. And so whites, when they found out that a black was flattered when he heard the statement, "You're not like the others. If the blacks were just like you, we wouldn't have a race problem." He began to smile and straighten out his bow tie and dream lofty dreams. How one day he would be a part of the corporate 500, maybe the first black in the White House, maybe the first president of a corporate 500 in America. That kind of syndrome caused the black to leave his people. Psychologically, he may ride through the hood from time to time. Psychologically, he's not there. His entire life has been spent trying to find a way to get away from the black masses. When Jews live among Jews, they say, well, that's natural, it's religious. When Japanese live among Japanese, they say, well, that's cultural. When white people live among white people, they say, well, that's certainly natural. But when black people live among black people, it is said that's segregation. Break it up. Because blacks couldn't possibly want to live among themselves. They couldn't possibly want to go to school with themselves. They couldn't possibly want to work for another black business. This syndrome that has been perpetuated by a group of whites who've made money in the black community and did not want any blacks in business. In fact, wrote into the charter of the NAACP when it was founded that the NAACP couldn't even own land. They wanted to assure there would be no competition. They couldn't do it in the white world. In the white world, that would be called a monopoly or antitrust, and they might have to go to jail. Certainly pay a fine. In the black community, they could masquerade with these hand-picked Negro leaders or so-called leaders who had as their agenda to disappear.
I believe that black people are searching for a key to an unlocked door, that the door to opportunity is wide open and will cost you little to get in. The resources necessary to succeed in this country as Africans in America are here. We have everything we need to succeed except each other. We have money. Oh, we're not poor. We're just broke. Our money goes in one direction away from us. We've taken the art of consumption to a whole new level. We don't sell anything that we purchase, and we don't make anything that we buy. We just consume. We are a $1.1 trillion annual economy. If we were a nation, we would be the 16th richest nation in the entire world. I've traveled every place that black people have been dispersed, brothers and sisters. I've been to South Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, West Africa, all over North Africa, and all over South America and the Caribbean. And there are no black people in the entire world doing better than we are.
I've been paying attention to that media gang because this guy has went viral for talking about the reason that there's so much violence at black parties and functions. Take a look.
Y'all know why the vibe be so off in some of the black clubs, man. We really be in there trying to have a good time listening to 30 straight serial killer songs. Like, we really in there trying to have a good time and vibe out to murder music. We in there hypnotized. We damn near all done lost somebody to violence. That's why we all in there on the verge of socking some shit. Cause we keep listening to serial killer music. These young mad ass talk about hitting somebody with a switch. Man, 30 clip, slide. Man, we in there drunk. We really hypnotized listening to this devil. I ain't gonna lie, like, I don't like some of the music, but it be like, man, how's we partying, trying to have a good time listening to murder music? This psychopath shit, for real. Like, man, indeed, we gotta start switching it up, man. And something gotta change, cause that shit really, like...
I really can't agree more, because the amount of violent drill music that we hear on a regular basis is just completely out of hand. In fact, it's oversaturated. Every region in the United States has their own form of drill music. Let's not forget each continent. There's so much pollution in the music industry that we have to resort to hearing constant songs about sliding somebody.
The problem comes when many people want to dismiss what the Bible says because of the fact that it happened so long ago. But help me out. How do you know Abraham Lincoln was real? How do you know there was a real George Washington? How do you know that Thomas Jefferson really was all that in a bag of chips when it came to the Declaration of Independence and a Constitution? How do you know all that? You know, you weren't there. You haven't met them, you haven't seen them, but you know what? There was a witness. There was somebody who was there who can give testimony. And they wrote down their testimony to tell you who they were and what they did and how they did it, or they wrote it themselves. And so there was testimony for history that you were not located at. So if you can believe the testimony of eyewitnesses about American history, you ought to be able to believe the testimony of the apostles about Jesus Christ. He says, you got a witness. It's common for preachers to say in a church service, can I get a witness? What they're asking, is there anybody out there who can testify that what I'm saying is true? Well, let me tell you what John's goal is. John is saying, I was there, seen it, heard it, touched it, felt it. I was there, and I'm gonna be a witness, but my goal is for my witness to become your testimony. What I
straight. You need to develop a prayer life with God.
Okay.
Meditation, eating healthy, all the practices that are hidden from you. All the things that would make you a better person are all the things that you're not going to see a high level of views on YouTube. You're not going to see a high level of views on developing your spiritual understanding. Not that it doesn't exist, but you're going to see more drama. You know, what you feed your soul. So how do you keep that balance? Just like you feed your body, you got to feed your mind. What are you feeding your mind every day?